Okay, so we are heading towards our hexaroline model, but I'm breaking this down into as many little parts as I can. So the next thing we're going to talk about is often called factor product intensities, or I'm just going to talk about two factors of production, labor and land, and just to kind of bring it down to earth and make it more simple. But this goes also for the other one that's commonly talked about as capital. So the idea with intensities is which product uses more land than labor, and then which product uses more labor compared to land. And so I'm just going to go ahead and work through an example, and you'll understand it by the end of it. It's a super easy calculation. It sounds kind of complicated at first. So suppose you own a farm and you have the option to produce either wheat or cotton, and 1 unit of wheat requires 1 acre of land and 2 man-hours to harvest the wheat that's grown on that acre of land, while 1 unit of cotton requires 2 acres of land and 2 man-hours to harvest. So the questions are which product is labor intensive and which product is land intensive. That's how they'll be phrased. So this idea of intensity, you just take the ratios of the amount of land needed and the amount of man-hours needed. So for wheat, the labor for wheat is equal to 2. So you need 2 man-hours over the land, which we'll use a T for. So T is equal to land. Should write that. So over the T for wheat, which is equal to 1, because you need 1 acre of land for wheat, right there. So then we need to compare that. So we need to compare that to the labor for cotton over the land needed for cotton, which the labor for cotton is 2 man-hours, and the land needed for cotton is 2 acres. So that is equal to 1. So we have on the wheat side, we have 2, and on the cotton side, we have 1. And 2 is greater than 1, so we are going to say that wheat is labor intensive because labor was on top. So wheat is labor intensive. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about cotton, or talk about land intensity. So to do land intensity, we are going to just go ahead and do the same thing, only we are going to put land on the top. So we are going to do the amount of land needed for wheat over the amount of land needed, or over the amount of labor needed for wheat. So that will just be 1 over 2, because again we're just flipping these two. We're flipping this and this. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to compare that to the amount of land needed for cotton over the amount of labor needed for cotton, which is 2 over 2. Sorry, I'm already simplifying, which is equal to 1. So we have 1/2 for wheat, and we have 1 for cotton. So 1 is greater than 1/2, so we are going to say that cotton is land intensive because land is on top. So cotton is land intensive. And that's all there is to it. So the things that I want to point out is that to calculate to talk about intensity, you need to be comparing two goods. So you need to be saying you can only have a product or a good be labor intensive relative to another one. So if we were just talking about wheat, we couldn't talk about intensities. We have to have wheat and cotton, and we have to have that option to choose between the two. And then the calculation is simple. When you want to talk about labor intensive, you put labor on top and calculate the ratios and compare it, and whichever one is greater is the one that is labor intensive. So whichever one is greater is the one that is labor intensive. And then you do the exact same thing putting land on the top, and then you just compare it, and whichever one is greater, in this case it was cotton. Since 1 is greater than 1/2, cotton was the one that is land intensive. And so you'll always get, when you're comparing two goods with only two inputs, you'll always get that one is intensive in one input and the other is intensive in the other input. So hopefully that's clear, and we'll use this tool when we go develop this model later on. All right, see you then.